a lot of people in my party and a lot of people in the media has turned Iran into the underdog.
Sir, just to go back to something that you said just a moment ago in your answer, who in your party do you believe is cheering for Iran?
Warmonger MAGA Democrat John Fetterman, a Democrat in name only, went on Kasie Hunt's show on CNN, once again seeming to cozy up to Trump, going directly against what many believe is the will of the American people. We're going to take a look at clips from this exchange between John Fetterman and Kasie Hunt. It gets tense, a bit heated at moments, and definitely worth breaking down. I'll share my thoughts on it as well. Let's get into this one together.
As we approach the 7th week of the Iran war, parallel efforts by both House and Senate Democrats to curb President Trump's war powers have failed in recent days. It was the second such effort in the House and the fourth in the Senate. Joining me now is one of just 2 Democrats across both chambers who voted against that effort, and the only Democrat in the Senate to do so, Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania. Senator, thank you so much for being here. I want to start with why you broke with your party on this, because this is something overwhelmingly that, of course, Democrats voted to do.
Well, because in fact, every single Democrat has already been on record saying we can't ever allow Iran to acquire a nuclear bomb. Harris, Clinton, everyone that's run for president, we can't ever allow that to happen. And then Trump happened to do something about that to prevent that. That's why I support that. And a lot of that, I'm not the only Democrat that supports this, but I'm the only Democrat that's willing to stand up and say it's the right thing, because I know how politically toxic it is as a Democrat to support this. Israel's becoming more and more toxic for a Democrat to support that. I'm proud to stand with Israel. 80% of Democrats view Israel in a negative way. You have, like, Plattner has a Nazi tattoo on his chest, and now it was just released that he was praising and celebrating a video online where Hamas was beating and torturing Israeli soldiers to death. And then the guy in Michigan, he's leading now in that race. As my party becomes more and more hostile to Israel, and now you have people like AOC voting against Iron Dome, the technology that prevents tens and tens of Israeli deaths from the rockets that those cowards fire at civilians. So if it's what's necessary, I'll be the last Democrat standing with Israel through this.
Do you think that the left of your party, do you think that your party, I'll just amend my statement, do you think your party has a problem with anti-Semitism?
Sure, definitely. I mean, the guy that's going to win the primary in Maine has a Nazi tattoo on his chest, and that's no problem for a lot of voters. So I don't know why that's crazy. And now, I mean, we know he knew what that was. I mean, if you're back over 12, 13 years cheering about the death of Israeli soldiers, I mean, you clearly have a serious issue, and the left has a serious issue with anti-Semitism, and they're just palling around someone like Hassan Piker, the guy that he absolutely is proud to cheer for Hamas, loves Hamas. The Democrats are proud to stand with him and campaign with him. Go ahead, try to win Pennsylvania, and campaign around Hassan Piker saying, America deserved 9/11, or Hamas is 1,000% better than Israel, or I don't care about the rapes, and for all these other things. I mean, we have a serious problem with my party. So if I have to be the last man standing in the Democratic Party, I'm proud to stand with Israel.
Your colleague, Senator Alyssa Slotkin, voted not to send aid to Israel, which a number of other Democrats as well, an overwhelming number of Democrats in the Senate voted for too. But this is what she said in her statement about blocking offensive weapons to Israel. She says this, quote, "The people of Israel, like all people throughout the region, deserve long-term security and peace, but being pro-Israel today is not about simply supporting the political or military agenda of Prime Minister Netanyahu, just like being pro-American should not be equated with loyalty to President Trump. This is a complex truth that many of us who support Israel hold, and it applies to my own patriotism and government as well." What do you say to her about that?
That's absurd. It's like she's a Democratic senator. Why aren't you criticizing Iran? Why aren't you criticizing Hamas or Hezbollah or these other kinds of forces that, if you have to pick a side here, criticize that. So that's where we're at as a Democratic Party. And you're going to vote against the kinds of critical aid that Israel requires to beat back and just.
They all should be voting against these weapons going to Israel. And with Alyssa Slotkin, she got in trouble, or really she got exposed, when she went on breaking points a few months ago, and they really hammered her on there. They try to do this threading the needle approach of saying, well, just offensive weapons is what we're against. We're voting against offensive weapons, but not defensive weapons. It should be all weapons. There shouldn't be any distinction. All of the Democrats should be saying, we're cutting off funding to Israel. Then they would actually be aligned with the vast majority of their party, and the vast majority of Americans. But John Fetterman here seems almost proud to be going against the will of the people.
Destroy organizations like Hezbollah. Yeah, like I said, if you have to pick a side in a war, and clearly we have a side, and now I'm proud to stand on the side of Israel and America, and I think these are incredibly positive developments. And now here we are as things kind of continue to wind down. I was been the only Democrat in the Senate, now perhaps left in the entire Congress, that epic fury was necessary, because that contradicts every single thing that every Democrat has said. We can't.
I don't know who the person is that keeps coughing in the background. That's part of CNN's video, not something from my video.
Ever allow Iran to acquire a nuclear bomb. Clearly that they were going to, and with they've done something. That's why I support that. And up until 60 days, I'm going to continue to support these things, because that's actually the way the War Power Act that was crafted.
Yeah, I was actually going to follow up with you on that. If this goes past 60 days, will you continue to vote the way that you have and allow the president to continue this effort, or will you change your vote?
Well, people just don't realize how the way it works. And they continue to have this vote. I mean, Iran has celebrated this. A lot of people in my party and a lot of people in the media has turned Iran into the underdog. They're like Rudy and putting him up on their shoulders and cheering for Iran at this point. It's absurd. It's absurd. I'm going to back the president. I'm going to back our military in Israel through until that 60-day is triggered, and then there's an opportunity to extend that by 30 days. No matter how many times you're going to vote no, no, no. Why? Because that just has empowered and emboldened Iran to continue for these things. So I think it seems like it's going to wind down, and people seem to be almost gleeful, like people like Tom Friedman saying, well, if Iran, if that's a big win for Trump or Netanyahu, if now Iran, surrenders, so, and that's easy for me, yes, and so that's what's important to support. And we're heading to a strong end at this point.
Sir, just to go back to something that you said just a moment ago in your answer, who in your party do you believe is cheering for Iran?
I'm saying it's like if you are making it seem that we, America is not the force of good in the world, criticizing America, criticizing Israel. You have Iran, what they've done. The kinds of outrage, with Iranians massacring tens and tens of thousands.
As Americans, we have a right to be critical of our own government. We also have a right to be critical of the so-called allies of the United States when they're doing the wrong things. The fact of the matter is, Iran did not attack the United States. Iran was not a real threat to the United States, and Donald Trump chose to carry out an illegal and offensive war, and it has turned into a disaster. So being critical of what's happening doesn't mean you hate America, or that you want America to lose, or that you're anti-Semitic, or any of the other claims that John Fetterman is making here. I'm glad that Kasie Hunt pushed back at least a little bit on that. But the reality is, the vast majority of Americans understand that this is wrong. They know Iran wasn't a real threat, and they don't want to see tens of billions, hundreds of billions, even trillions of dollars wasted on yet another war in the Middle East.
Now, if you're going to continue to vote against our military, if you're proud to vote against defensive kinds of systems like Iron Dome for Israel, and you can continue to vote down something that is going to fail, that actually must absolutely excite Iran to see, the way that many people, in the Democratic Party, doesn't back the attempts to try to break and destroy the Iranian regime to acquire a nuclear bomb.
Yeah. So I know you and I have spoken a number of times, and I think sometimes I've annoyed you in asking this question, but considering the way that you have talked about your party in this interview, I have to ask you again, are you you're committed to being a Democrat despite everything you've just laid out?
Well, of course, yeah, I am. I absolutely a committed Democrat. Absolutely. I vote the 91, 92% Democratic line. But I am the only Democrat now that's proud to consistently stand with Israel, and I'm going to do that. And that's been very damaging within my standing as a Democrat. But what's necessary, I'll be the last man standing with Israel.
All right, Senator John Fetterman, always grateful to talk to you, sir. Thanks very much for being here.
Okay.
Okay, all right, coming up. I like how John Fetterman just says, okay at the end. He doesn't even say thank you. He should leave the party. John Fetterman should go and become a Republican, because this party finally seems to be moving away from this, at least we hope. At the very least, the voters of the Democratic Party are moving away from blindly supporting Israel, from wasting more and more money on these wars against countries that pose no real threat to the United States, countries that didn't attack us, offensive and illegal wars pushed by Donald Trump and other presidents. So hopefully, Democrats start to push in a different direction, no longer voting for these MAGA Democrats, these warmonger Democrats, these Democrats in name only, like John Fetterman, and instead bringing in actual progressive candidates who will fight for the American people, who will truly put America first, which is what Donald Trump claimed to run on. They might even win over some of the Republicans they seem to covet so much by actually being America first and saying, yeah, Donald Trump wasn't real about that. We're going to be America first. We're going to stop sending all of our money overseas and instead use that money to help people here at home, to expand Medicare, Medicaid, daycare, Social Security. All of these things that Donald Trump claims we can't afford, because apparently we always have money for war, something that John Fetterman seems perfectly on board with as well. Every Democrat should be saying, we're not sending another penny overseas for these wars. We're going to invest that money right here, in healthcare, in education, in rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. That's what the American people want. And right now, John Fetterman is on the wrong side of that. He can keep repeating this idea that people are somehow rooting against the United States, but supporting and funding another disastrous war is what actually puts America at risk. We're now weeks into this, with no clear end in sight, no matter what Donald Trump says. Putting America first means investing in Americans, improving lives here at home. What's happening in Iran doesn't improve the lives of Americans. If anything, it makes things worse. And John Fetterman seems not only okay with that, but proud of it. He's even said he'd stand alone on it if he had to. So let me know what you think about this conversation on CNN between MAGA Democrat John Fetterman and Kasie Hunt. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.